Hey guys, we found a nice 4C spot for this one. We're looking at the Surface 604 Boar Hunter. We've covered this bike a couple times in the past. It's really unique because it uses this matte Kryptek camouflage paint. Really nice. They carried that all the way down through the fork. We've got a thru-axle up front, 15mm, extra strong, 150mm wide hub spacing, and that's because we've got these Juggernaut tires. These are 26 by 4.5. You can take these all the way down to 5 PSA and up to 3 PSI, and that's going to allow you to either navigate soft, loamy terrain, sand, even really soft like beach sand if you go all the way down to 5. I've done that in the past and it's pretty impressive. Or pump it up and maybe you're on like a hard pack gravel trail or concrete, and the tires are going to make some more noise, and they do weigh a bit more, but you're going to be good. It's going to work. It's going to be a bit more efficient with the high PSI. And you'll notice that they've done a great job here with the rims, with those punch outs. So that's great. It reduces the weight a little bit. They've gone with black tire liners, so you don't notice it as much, and that's the name of the game here with this bike. They're really trying to help it blend in. We've got the black spokes, black hubs, everything really nice. We do have some reflective, so shiny components inside the Ascendo 60 integrated headlight. I do like that light. It's got 2 beams, so it does cast a pretty good spread of light, and that's going to help you to see as well as be seen. You've got a little reflector at the bottom. Same thing with the pedals down there, but and I guess I should point out that the tire casing, they've got that white labeling going on. So there are a few things you could do to this bike just to make it even more camouflage. Maybe you just get like a black Sharpie or something and go over those tire decals and maybe take off the headlight. Apparently they do offer an optional rear light as well. You can always add your own. Lots of options out there, but it's neat that I think they can actually integrate it. For me, having integrated lights is cool because then you don't have to remember to like charge the disposable battery cells inside, which could run dry if you maybe go for a ride and you're tired and you just park your bike and you forget to turn your headlight off and it's blinking, or it's, you know, just the solid beam, and then it's going to wear down. But when you've got this nice big rechargeable battery pack right here, this is a Rienshin case, by the way. This is like semi-integrated, so part of the battery actually sits down in the frame, which keeps weight low and center, which is very nice, but part of it sticks up, and so they're able to use, I think it's like 2500 or 3500 milliamp cells to give you 2 different battery pack sizes. So the stock bike comes with this front and rear rack. It comes with a 48 volt 10.4 amp hour battery. What we're looking at here is the 14 amp hour upgrade. So, you know, you're going to get higher capacity if you do that upgrade. It's going to cost a bit more. It costs about $200 more to do that upgrade, but it's the kind of thing that, you know, over the life of the bike, having more cells, being able to use the light, being able to, you know, use the throttle or go at higher speeds more frequently, that $200 really goes a long way. So the price point on this is like $24.99 USD or $26.99 USD. Kind of keep that in mind as we go through, because the bike as we see it is not perfectly stock. And normally I try to review these stock, but they kind of wanted to show off the suspension seat post. That's our Suntour NCX. That is an upgrade. 30.4 millimeters is the standard seat post, and it's got a single bolt aluminum alloy, 350 millimeter length. This is a nice upgrade, but it's 27.2, so they actually had to use a shim. So if you're buying your own suspension seat post, just keep that in mind. You might need a little shim like they've got. I think if you buy it from them, they include the shim, which is nice. And then these really big steel fenders. And you'll notice they've got the support arm right here that's a bit adjustable, and then a big bolt right here, and that's to add a little bit more support and maybe less rattling on that front fender. Okay, so again, the front rack and the rear rack, those come standard, but not the fenders. And you do hear like little rocks and stuff kind of getting kicked up in there. The rear fender especially, can see it bounce a bit. It's not connected to the rack like they did with the front fender. So maybe a little bit of room for improvement there, but steel fenders tend to be really strong, maybe a little bit quieter than aluminum, but if you scratch them over time, they can start to rust. So for me, it's a bit of a trade-off. That's one of the areas where it was like, you know, it does add weight. As as shown right here, this weighs about 72 pounds, but without the fenders and with the standard 10.4 amp hour battery pack, it's going to weigh closer to like 67, 68. And again, suspension seat post, that also adds to the cost and to the weight. Keep all that in mind. I do like that with the entire range of Surface 604 bikes for this 2020 season, the battery pack's interchangeable. So you could have a Rook or a Colt, those are like their city models, or you could get the Shred, which is like their hardtail mountain bike, and the battery would be interchangeable between all of those. I really like that, and I do like that it also has a little USB charging port built into the side. That's Type A, 5 volts, 1 amp of power. Same thing on the display. To me, that is really handy. I like that positioning up here a lot better than down on the battery pack, because, you know, if you're using your phone or something for GPS, or maybe an additional light or some sort of other electronics up front, you're going to have shorter distance for the wire to go. But if you want to take off that battery, hey guys, got a couple curious fellas. If you want to take off this battery, let's say that you're camping, hello, and you have a tent set up or something, you can just twist that key. And I'm trying to do it one-handed here. Let's see if I almost got it. Nope. So it's spring-loaded, which is nice. There we go. So about 7.5 pounds on this battery pack here. That's the 48 volt, 14 amp hour, 672 watt hours, even though they've got like a mislabeled sticker right there. So 672 watt hours. You know, you could take this with you, and that's going to make the bike a little bit lighter to lift onto a car rack, which would be nice. So maybe you've got one of those hanging racks that goes through right there on the frame, and you want to have extra space. You can take the battery pack off, and you can actually use that capacity for your own portable electronics, again, maybe to charge your phone or to run a light in a tent. So there are a lot of cool scenarios with e-bikes, and then especially once you start to get into that like camping mindset, or you know, hunting, maybe get like a trailer. So there we go, it clicks in. You do not have to leave the key in, but I don't want to forget it, so I'm gonna keep it right there. This whole bike is purpose built to be a fat bike, so it has a wider bottom bracket spacing, really nice crank arms and pedals right here. I really like the big sturdy aluminum alloy Wellgo platform pedals. Back here, really wide hub spacing again, and that creates room for this fat bike specific Bafang planetary geared hub motor. This is a 500 watt nominal, 750 watt peak hub motor, and it offers about 80 newton meters of torque. Very capable. These geared motors, they tend to be a little bit smaller in size than gearless, when they do produce a little bit of a zippy noise, like ring, you know, and you'll hear that when we go for the ride, but they don't produce any cogging drag, and they tend to be more compact and a bit lighter. So for me, that's a worthwhile trade. There really aren't too many bikes that are Hunter set up like this with the camo and everything that even have gearless hub motors, but I wanted to call that out because the motor sort of hides behind that cassette. And this is 11 to 34 tooth back here. So you can see that on one side. And on the other side, we have 180 millimeter disc brake rotor. These are Tektro hydraulic disc with dual piston calipers. We got these 3-finger levers, and both levers have motor inhibitors. So as you pull those, it's going to cut power to the motor, which is really nice. There are times where, especially with a throttle or a torque sensing pedal assist setup, you get kind of carried away or excited going around a turn, or just surprised. And I've accidentally, like, you know, I've wanted to stop, but I've still been grabbing and push that throttle. So having those overrides is really, really nice. This is a fairly powerful setup. They sell it in Canada and the United States. It's sort of a North America model, and it's set up as class 2 with a top speed of 20 miles per hour. So we've got that torque sensing pedal assist, and it uses this like TMM4 strain sensor right down here. It's this black plate that's actually connected to the derailleur hanger, but you can see a wire right in there, and that's actually where it gets that torque signal from. These are very dynamic. Like as you're pedaling, the harder you push, the more power you get back from the system. And that's nice because there are times where, you know, here it's pretty safe. It's a very stable terrain, okay? But maybe you're in the backcountry and there's logs and then there's steep drop-offs or something. You don't want to have a cadence sensor that's just going to go from on to off. based on movement. This one, it's not just movement, it's based on how hard you're pushing. So it feels a lot more natural, which again, for this kind of riding, I think could be a good thing. Now that these plates and all the bolts and everything back here, that's a little bit more sensitive. You've got a lot going on there, extra wires. We don't have like a derailleur guard or anything. So just keep that in mind in terms of tightening this and taking good care of it. The good news is, if something happens to your torque sensing pedal assist system, you still have a throttle, and that's what makes this class 2. Now you could take the throttle completely off. There's like a quick disconnect right here, and then this would be a class 1 electric bike, or you can go nuts with this thing and actually go into the display and change the settings and raise it from 32 kilometers per hour up to like 50 plus kilometers per hour. It probably tops out closer to this 45 kilometers per hour, 28 miles per hour, which is like a class 3 that speed pedelec. The thing is, I think the throttle can also go above 20. And so I think the reason that they left this system sort of open like that is a lot of people who want to go hunting and stuff, you might be on like national forest land or private land or BLM land. There are certain areas where they don't have restrictions. Like you might be riding this in the company of like ATVers or you know, motorcycles and stuff. And so this can operate like those vehicles in places where you don't need a license, which I think is really cool, because having access to higher speeds and a little bit more power is not a bad thing, especially if you got like a trailer or something like that. So for me, that was definitely worth calling out. We've got this extra big rack back here with the slats on top, so you can put a trunk bag. It's got pannier hangers on the sides with a bungee loop at the bottom. So that's kind of nice. You could really load this up, and see the hanger is a little bit lower than the top platform, so they aren't going to collide with each other. And then up front, we've got another rack, which it's fork mounted versus frame mounted. So when you turn, it does turn with the bike. It's nice that the headlight does point where you're steering, but the downside is, you know, if I didn't have this stick here propping the bike up, this would tend to tip to the side. Like, see, it's kind of doing it right now. And then see, your gear kind of dumps to the side. But it's got those slats, and it's got the pannier hangers on the side, as well as like the bungee loop or the lock-on loop here, so that if you have additional bags, they aren't going to flop around. We've got 4 bolts going on. It reinforces the front fender. I mean, it's very well done for what it is. And there are benefits to this, mainly like the light, but there are other models of fat bikes that have bolts up here on the head tube, and the basket would connect there, and then it wouldn't turn, but it would be more stable, like, and it wouldn't affect your steering. This does add weight in addition to the already heavy 4.5 inch fat tire, so keep that in mind. And I think this is an 1.125" straight head tube, steering tube, so you know, you can't use this with an aftermarket suspension fork like the RockShox Bluto, for example, 1.125" straight. There just aren't as many choices for like air suspension and stuff. But most people will be like, well, I don't want suspension because I'm not going to be able to mount my basket, and it's not going to be camo anymore. So maybe that's why they made that change. I think it used to be tapered, but they're always adjusting things and trying to dial it in, and I appreciate that. So again, we still have the sturdy through axle. You know, we've got the excellent braking, hydraulic disc brakes, very important for a heavy bike. It's a pretty neat setup, very unique to me, and the saddle feels pretty good too. This is a Cellular Rail gel saddle, fairly active, narrow, long, like nose on this thing, so you're not going to get chafing as you pedal. Lots of adjustability. This bike comes in 2 frame sizes, which is really unique, especially for something that's so custom like this. So they have a small, medium, I think it's 17.5, and then a medium large 19. So we're on the medium large right here, and it feels pretty good to me. I'm a 135-pound rider, 5'9" in terms of height, and you'll see how high I have the seat up, and I really like that suspension post. But when you lower the tire pressure, that gives you a bit of suspension as well. Just really big contact patch, nice and floaty feel on this. You know, unique tire size, like inner tube size if you get a flat. Keep that kind of stuff in mind when you're preparing for a trip. You might want to have an extra couple of tubes and like a pump, so that you could lower the PSI, go across the loamy, muddy section, and then raise it again to get that efficiency back, because you do go through that battery fairly quickly if you're loaded up and you're relying on that throttle a lot, which brings me back to that $200 upgrade on the battery. I think that's it's probably a pretty good idea. While we're down here, I want to point out the kickstand placement, excellent. This little tab, they've actually mounted the stand on the inside, and when we stow it like this, there we go. See, there's a little bit of clearance. It's not actually making contact with that rotor, which, you know, can kind of bend it. It's really strong spring too. You can hear it just snapping. Like, this feels like a pretty rugged bike. Oh, and you know, I should come back down to the cassette and talk about the derailleur a little bit. This is SRAM X5. It doesn't have a roller clutch, which would keep it open and make it easier to change the rear wheel, but we don't have quick release back here. I think these are 18mm nuts on a threaded 12mm keyed axle. And I should actually check out this other side. I didn't see, I think we've got like a little torque washer in there, but there's no torque arm, which is something I've seen on a couple of the other bikes. I'm not seeing a problem here, but over time, if you're really juicing it and there's a lot of energy going through the system, the keyed axle kind of pushes into this aluminum alloy frame. It can kind of chew it up over time. So keep that in mind. Make sure these are tight, then nothing's going loose, because if it does go loose, that rear wheel will spin, and then it'll spin this cable and shred it off, and that'll be no good. We do have a quick disconnect point right here if you needed to service the rear wheel. And again, 11 and 34 tooth, not too bad. 34 tooth chainring, no guide, no plastic cover, nothing like that, but it is hollow spindle, which is a little bit lighter and stiffer, so that's pretty nice. No narrow wide tooth pattern. So I'm just saying this because you could get that chain bouncing off. Your pant leg could touch that chain, kind of get greasy and stuff, but they're probably trying to save a little bit of weight, and they might not have had room because this is such a wide bottom bracket. You see how they've actually bent the frame in here just to make room for the chainring. So they probably just didn't have room for aluminum alloy guide plates like we've seen on some of the other bikes. So anyway, back here to the derailleur, SRAM X5. In comparison to the Shimano group set, this is like an Alivio or Dior. So there's like Tourney, Altus, Acera, Alivio, Dior. And so this is, you know, 4 or 5 steps up in their lineup. And I've talked to a couple people who really like SRAM products, and they say, hey, it's tight, it's reliable. The little shifter pod up here, it doesn't wear out. And this is just coming from them. I don't have experience, and I don't want to say one way or the other. I wish that this has two-way high trigger. It just has the forward shifting motion, but it does have a 4-step low, so you can just dump those gears if you're going up to a steep climb and you really need to add some pedal power of your own, which, you know, would be good to save the battery and just give you a mechanical advantage. I pedaled most of the way over here on my own steam, just on the flats, and this bike was tons of fun. Once you get the momentum going, it coasts and it feels very stable. Yeah, I rode with no hands a little bit, and it felt good. So, oh, I do want to point out also, they used to have an adjustable angle stem, and I think they just went for this, I think it's like 70 or 90mm length, 45 degree, and we've got several risers, spacers down here. So it's actually kind of upright, low rise handlebar, a little bit more comfort oriented. If you were a really tall person, you could get a flatter stem that was longer, and they would give you more reach. And I think that, combined with the relatively long seat post, is going to allow this to fit a wide range of people, especially with those 2 frame sizes. Like, that's just so unique. Okay, so I think that's it. Also, maybe shorter levers here. They aren't going to like bump your knuckles the way that Shimano does. I personally, I'm used to, and I really like Shimano, but you know, SRAM does a good job. It's the same company as like RockShox. And then up here, the grips, they're nothing special. They're just, you know, flat rubber, no locking or anything like that, but they do blend in. They look nice. You've even got a little flick bell, which you can just take right off if you're going into the woods. And maybe onto the display. Yeah, I think that's where we want to go next. So once the battery's charged and mounted, it uses just a standard 2-amp charger. Again, nothing too special. Weighs like 1.8 pounds. I don't have it with me. The charging port is relatively low. See how it's by the crank arm? So if you had this plugged in and someone kicked the pedal like this, you could accidentally hit and then maybe bend or unplug the bike. So be careful. Ideally, that charging point would be on the drive side, because if the bike tips, it usually tips towards the non-drive side, and that's why all the sensitive stuff's over here. Ideally, the charging port would be right here where the USB port is. But, I mean, they used it for that. It's not the end of the world. It just means you got to bend over a little bit more, plug it in down there, and then be careful with those crank arms. Okay, on to the display. So this is a Surface 604 branded display, but it's by Bafang, same guys that make the the motor back here. So they do a pretty good job. A little button pad off to the side. Press the power button for a second. Got a little readout there, Surface 604 branded. We've got a battery percentage infographic. Very nice. So much better than just 5 bars. This is much more precise. I love that they went with a percentage. In the middle, we have speed in kilometers per hour right now, and then power. That's like how much power the motor is producing. And then down here we have trip distance, odometer, and the level of assist. So right now we're in assist level 1. I could take it down to 0, and the throttle still works, okay? So keep that in mind. This bike is a little bit more advanced in that sense. Like anytime the bike is on, let's say you turn it on and you forget and you're kind of getting on and you bump that throttle, it could take off, and it's a fairly powerful motor. So just keep that in mind, especially if you're loading it onto a car and someone has their hands like in the wheel and you bump that throttle, they're gonna get cut, which is no fun. Okay, so back here. It goes all the way up to level 5. That's where you're gonna get the most power, the most torque. The other readouts on this you get to by pressing I. So we can cycle from trip to odometer to max speed, average speed, time, and then it's back to odometer. And then there's a dedicated light button, which is pretty cool. If we hold that for a second, it actually dims the display, which is so great because you don't want to lose your night vision while you're riding, especially if you're in the woods and this is the only source of light besides, I guess, the headlight. You want to focus on the terrain. So there we go, fairly light. Definitely appreciate that it points where you're going, and again, there's no integrated rear light unless you kind of pay extra. And then we come back here and turn off the lights so we get that bright mode back. It's actually very readable for me. I realize we're in a high contrast environment. I hope you guys can see it okay, and the green coloring is really cool. It kind of blends in. And then let's see, if I hold the minus key, I'm gonna get walk mode, which is really handy like if you get a flat tire. I want to see if walk mode works in 0. Nope. Oh, yes, it does. I just need to be more patient. Great. So let's imagine you got a flat front tire and you're all loaded up with gear or maybe a kill or something like that. But the flat tire, you can't ride, but this is a lot of weight to push. So you could use that walk mode and you could steer the front wheel, and then the bike's going to help you limp home. And that's fantastic. So glad they have that. The throttle would also activate, and that's another good way to kind of do a simulated walk mode with a bit extra power. I've actually been on fat bikes where there was a pretty technical terrain and I just didn't feel comfortable riding up, so I got off the bike and then I used the throttle to like pull me the rest of the way. And in sand and stuff, the throttle is so useful. Like there are other mid-drive powered fat bikes that you could use for hunting, but you have to be on the bike pedaling. And sometimes even getting on the bike when the terrain is really sloppy is difficult. So having a throttle to kind of pull you along, and then you jump on the saddle and ride away, like very cool. And I really like that they left this thing kind of unlocked. Okay, so let's see. To get into some of the settings, we hold plus and minus, and then press I to navigate. So display settings, change the units, the luminance, dormancy, so how quickly it shuts off, straight to charge view. So right now we're in percentage, which is my preference. It's more precise. Trip reset, AL sensitivity, that might be like for the torque sensor. Password, and I think you do need a password up, like enter to get to the speed adjust, but we're unlocked right now. And then voltage 48 volt, you want to keep that there because it's a 48 volt battery. Okay, then back, and we go to advanced settings. So wheel, speed limit, right now we're at 32 kilometers per hour, battery info, error code, and back. So that's everything in the display. Again, I do like it. I hope you guys have been able to see this all right. It's just kind of a bright day, and to be fair, you know, this is like the backlit design. It's not the monochrome like white and black. So I don't know, I'm happy with it, and in real life it's very easy to read. So I think that's just about it. Might be time to hop on this thing and do a little test ride. Okay, I've got it up in pedal assist level 3. I'm just gonna cruise along on this trail. There's nothing too technical going on, but I want to show you that motor. There we go. Feeling fairly stable even at low speeds here. This is pretty impressive. Just that extra weight of that front tire. I'll take it off-road here for a second. hear it bouncing around because we've got the tire pressure fairly high. Maybe a little extra noise because of those fenders. And now I'm using the throttle to override. Again, that gives you full power, in my case, up to 20 miles per hour. I'll do some shifting here. There we go. Really slow down the cadence. This is the highest gear, so, you know, we're almost 23 kilometers per hour right now. Very slow. So if you did have this thing unlocked, you'd still have really comfortable pedaling. You wouldn't be beating eggs. Okay, so now I'm going to take it all the way up to 5. Just max things out. This is just perfect. I mean, it feels very smooth for the gravel. Just these big tires are eating it up. Still a very slow, comfortable pedal cadence that whole time. And then really smooth braking, even with just one hand. Awesome. Found a little lookout spot here. It's pretty cool. And it's pretty neat. I mean, I'm in the highest level of assist, but it's not overreacting right now because it's a torque sensor. So that's really nice. Okay, guys, you've got a front row seat to that very standard steel 34-tooth chainring. Again, that's something you could swap for a narrow, wide chainring, just so you don't get as many drops. I haven't had an issue. The SRAM X5 is pretty tight and it's shifting very crisp, but that's just one of the areas that's kind of basic. Nice hollow spindle down here, standard 170 millimeter crank arms on both frame sizes, and then we've got that 11 to 34 tooth cassette in the rear, 9-speed. So lots of gears to work with. I'm just gonna pedal along, shift through the gears. I'm gonna take it to the highest level of assist because, again, with the torque sensor back here, that, see the wire? This TMM4 torque sensor back there, it's very dynamic. I feel like the harder I push, the faster it goes. So I don't really need to change assist levels as frequently or actively as I would on a cadence sensing electric bike. So here we go. Very easy to hit that 32 kilometer per hour top speed. That's the current setup because we are on like a public path and following the rules, but neat that they've got that unlocked. You can go a lot faster and there's plenty of room in terms of cadence to do that comfortably. I also just want to comment at how quick the motor responds because it is a torque sensor. There really isn't any delay. I can start in maybe an imperfect pedal stroke position, but I'm still going to get assist almost instantly because of the torque sensor. Now, one of the trade-offs I've noticed is that when you're on bouncy terrain, especially in a high gear where there's just a lot of extra chain like slop, the chain can kind of bounce around, and I've experienced this before with some of the older Easy Motion e-bikes that used a similar torque sensor, and the chain would actually activate the motor. Even when I wasn't pedaling, it was just the tension kind of slopping around. So, you know, it's something to be aware of. Those motor inhibiting brake levers should reduce that problem as long as you've pulled them even just a little bit. It's going to cut power. But that is one of the trade-offs with this kind of a sensor. It's not quite as nice as like a mid-drive sensor that's measuring pedal speed, pedal cadence, and pedal torque, and then rear wheel speed, all those things combined. This is really just torque sensing. I also want to point out that I don't see a slap guard here. There's no sticker. That would probably create like a shiny mark, which would maybe be a less camo. But we are getting some chain state chips from the chain bouncing into the paint. So you could always use a clear piece of masking tape if you didn't mind the shiny look. Otherwise, I'm not sure if there's really a solution. Maybe get like a neoprene wrap or something. They do sell those on Amazon and some other locations online. I wanted to give you a cockpit view as well while we ride along. quite a bit of bounce happening because the tires are higher PSI right now, probably close to that 30 max, because we've been riding around on concrete to get the bike to this nice location. So keep that in mind. It'd be a little bit softer and quieter when you lower the pressure. I was gonna have my buddy Jason hold the camera, just get some third-person shots because I know you like that. So here we go. I'm gonna keep it up in the highest level of assist and just pedal around on the hills here and stuff. Hear the fenders rattling just a little bit, and I've got the gear in the highest on the highest. Actually, I'm in a lower gear because it stretches it out. That's what I was doing because I didn't want the chain bouncing around as much. That's just a little tip. If you're using the throttle for a longer distance and you keep hearing the chain, just go to a lower gear and that'll solve that. I'm gonna ride past one more time here. Surprisingly fast, like once you get on the concrete. Thanks so much, Jason. Well guys, I sure had fun exploring the woods and going in depth with this. I'm trying to cover bikes that I feel are unique or offer something sort of special. And I feel like, you know, $24.99 is a pretty good price point for such a custom fat electric bike, especially with the Kryptek camo and everything, the interchangeable batteries. A couple little things have changed since they first launched this bike, but the price has stayed fairly constant. And I like that they offer the custom fit fenders and a lot of these other accessories for people who might be in those wet locations and want to use this for commuting during the week and then, you know, really load it up for a hunting trip or camping on the weekends. For the full written review, I'll see you back at ElectricBikeReview.com. I've got all the specs, everything measured by hand, and there's a comparison tool so you can look at other leading fat bikes and just, you know, kind of pick and choose and scrutinize some of those details. I'll do my best to answer some comments here. I love you. Ride safe. We'll see you next time.